Why don't you all come grab a seat and we'll get this party started.
Hi, everybody. Can you all hear me? Is it on? Am I on? I'll come up here. Welcome, everybody, to the 64th meeting of San Diego Sunday Assembly. Yay! 64, we're getting old. Just a couple of housekeeping announcements. The media free zone is in the back and the left. If you don't want to be on film, we do film our assemblies and then put them up on our website for people who can't make it to see. We have free childcare available in the back for any children ages 1.5 and up. And with that, we will start off with our great song leader, Paul Svensson.
Good morning. I brought my banjo today. Back when I used to work in a church, the newspaper came one time to do a little thing. It's the guy who writes for the Union Tribune and goes around to all these churches. And he said, well, I walked in the building and there was a man standing at the front with a banjo and he looked prepared to use it. You know it. So a little family tune to start us off. Be courteous, kind, and forgiving. Be gentle and peaceful each day. Be warm and human and grateful. Have a good thing to say. Grandma's wisdom, you know. Be thoughtful and trustful and childlike. Be witty and happy and wise. Be honest and love all your neighbors. Be obsequious, purple and clairvoyant. Be pompous and rude and eat cactus. Be dull and boring and omnipresent. Criticize things you don't know about. Be oblong and have your knees removed. Grandma was losing it a little bit. Be sure to stop at all stop signs and drive 55 miles an hour. Pick up hitchhikers foaming at the mouth, then go home and get a master's degree in geology. Never go on a date with Bigfoot or wear snowshoes out in a minefield. Try not to think about televangelists. Just go into a closet and suck eggs. Be tasteless, crude, and offensive. Live in a swamp and be three-dimensional. Put a live chicken in your underwear. Get all excited and go to a yawning festival. Now, those of you who know me know that I don't sing alone. We're going to do this the old-fashioned way. Be courteous, kind, and forgiving. Be courteous, kind. Be gentle and peaceful each day. Be gentle and be warm and human and grateful. Be warm and human. Have a good thing to say. And have a good thing. Be thoughtful, trustful, and childlike. Be thoughtful and trustful and be witty and happy and wise. Be witty and happy and wise. Be honest and love all your neighbors. Be honest and love all your. Be obsequious, purple, and clairvoyant. Be obsequious, purple, and clairvoyant. Be pompous, rude, and eat cactus. Be pompous, rude, and eat cactus. Be dull and boring and omnipresent. Be dull and boring and omnipresent. Criticize things you don't know about. Criticize things you don't. Be oblong and have your knees removed. Be oblong and have your knees removed. Oh, you guys sound good. Almost like you believe every word of this. Be sure to stop at all stop signs. Be sure to stop at all signs. Drive 55 miles an hour. Drive 55. Pick up hitchhikers foaming in the mouth. Pick up hitchhikers foaming out the mouth. Go home and get a master's degree in geology. Master's degree in geology. Woo! That was close. Never go on a date with Bigfoot. Never go on a date with or wear snowshoes out in a minefield. Wear snowshoes out in a minefield. Try not to think about televangelists. Try not to think about televangelists. Go into a closet and suck eggs. Go into a closet and suck eggs. Oh, you're rocking. Home stretch. Be tasteless, crude, and offensive. I'm sorry I didn't lead you. Be tasteless, crude, and offensive. Be tasteless, crude. Live in a a swamp and be three-dimensional. Live in a swamp and be three. Put a live chicken in your underwear. Put a live chicken in your underwear. Get all excited and go to a yawning festival. Get all excited and go to a yawning festival. Well, that was fun. What else can we do that's fun? Let's see. I might have an idea. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Some of you need words. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do-do. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Okay, if you have a low voice, you do the mana-mana. If you have a high voice, do the do-do-do-do-do. Ready? Mana-mana, do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do-do. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Well, many of you think this came from the Muppet Show, but I'm here to tell you it didn't. No, 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 no. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do-do. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Well, actually it did. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do-do. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. The song has a sordid history, which I'm going to share with you right now, because I'm all about education. This song came from a 1968, and I'm reading from Wikipedia, so you know it's true, exploitation documentary film about wild sexual and other behavior in Sweden. It's an Italian film about the Swedes. The song accompanied a scene in a sauna, which had the original title, "Hooray for Swedish Sauna!" Seriously. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do-do. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Okay, if you have a high voice, do the mana-manas, and if you got a low voice, do the do-do-do-do-dos. Ready, go. Do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Can you clap? Mana-mana, do-do-do-do-do. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. One more time. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do-do. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do. Mana-mana, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
Here at Assembly, one of the things we do is our Life Happens segment. This is, we're all one big family here, and families share. So if you have something you'd like to share with the Assembly, you can write it on one of these 3x5 cards. They're up at the welcome desk. You can do this with your name on it or without your name on it if you'd like to share in a little less personal way. So we have a few today. The first one is, let me put my glasses on so I can see. I'm getting old. I have been struggling with depression, lack of motivation, and general malaise this year. I'm happy to report that I successfully motivated myself to create several new art pieces and to get out in the Ageless Artist Show at the LGBT Center yesterday. Yay! Now to get my book to the printer. There, I've said it in front of everybody. Ooh, she's committed now. And that comes from Diana. Thank you, Diana. Jeffrey Ozen tributed his father on Facebook on his birthday and thanked him for always being there for him. They always listened to Elton John music together. That's nice. In September, Lynn Warner shares, in September, I will be joining BrainWorks, a neuropsychology practice in Sorrento Valley. She is very excited to be returning to part-time professional work. Yay, Lynn! And one I found super exciting when I read it, Lelia took her first steps without leg braces ever on Friday after 8 leg surgeries. Yay! That is super exciting news. So here at Sunday Assembly, our theme is Live Better, Help Often, and Wonder More. And so one of the parts of that is Help Often. And here to share this month's Help Happens message is Alexis Record.
Having a good time? Well, buckle up. No. We are going to talk about consent. So, hi y'all. I wanted to do some reminders, kind of a public service announcement about consent. Consent is enthusiastic, informed, continually sought, meaning it can be revoked at any time. In some contexts, consent is impossible and cannot be sought if the person's a minor, an animal under the influence, there's a threat or imbalance of power. Now this is true, we've probably all heard this of sexual consent, but it can be applied in many other situations, and the situation I want to talk about is taking people's pictures. So, we do Sandwich Saturdays twice a month where we hand out sandwiches and toiletries, and you've heard me talk about it a lot, and we service a community of people who are unsheltered. And those people cannot give consent to a picture. Here's why. And this was originally, we were going to talk about it last month because it was Comic-Con and there was a lot of lively people on the street in costume and a lot of cameras came out and this became an issue. So I just wanted to clarify and kind of explain why we don't take pictures. There's a power imbalance in this relationship we have. People don't feel like they can say no to a picture because you're handing them a sandwich. If they said no, could it be punitive? The other reason we don't take pictures of people is because we have heard stories about this affecting their employment opportunities later. Employers will Google you. They will look online at your social media, and it can affect you getting employment. And in that situation, handing someone a sandwich becomes harmful if you're expecting a quid pro quo. This is not an economic exchange. That's not what a gift should be. It shouldn't be with ties. It shouldn't be with expectations. The last reason I just want to touch on briefly is that Sandwich Saturdays is a bandage on a hemorrhage. It is the sandwich part, the toiletries part, the fruit and vegetables, the socks. These are just Band-Aids on a big, large problem. And becoming a secondary goal of our group, the primary goal being a relational, having relationships with people on the street. So if you have a camera out, you're not going to hear from Miss F about her master's degree and her relationship with her kids and how she ended up on the street. And you're not going to hear from Miss A, and these are all real examples of her domestic violence situation and what she needs. And last night, we had one of our people on the street who had just been raped, and after handing out toiletries, we had a very small, subtle group of us went back and bought this woman underwear and pants, and made sure she was okay. Imagine having a camera in her face, or imagine if someone else in our group had a camera out earlier. Would these people be telling us what they needed? Would they be sharing this relationship with us? Right now, we have partners in other charities who are donating things to us to give out to people simply because we meet a need that they can't meet in a building. Because as one of our partners mentioned specifically, you guys do outreach because you go out. Now, why do we go out? We don't have a building downtown and no permit, but it forced us to actually go out and see this firsthand and develop an empathy and develop relationships and get to know names and get to know familiar faces and know when something's not right. And be a presence, just standing there watching when a police officer is harassing someone because it's against the law to sleep in your car, it's against the law to sit too long somewhere, it's against the law to have your things out on a sidewalk. And some people get harassed more than others depending on the color of their skin and their vulnerability level. Vulnerability in a study done not so recently, I got it in 2014, but, and I can cite examples if you want them, but it was a cross-sectional, racially diverse study of homeless moms, and 92% of them had been assaulted physically or sexually while on the street. 92% means we are working with an extremely vulnerable group. They need the same respect, and they need to be seen as people just like everyone else, and that means asking, you can't even ask before you take a picture. Can your boss ask before asking you on a date? Same reason. So consent, enthusiastic, informed, continually sought, must not be a power imbalance, must not be under the influence. And so that's why we don't take pictures, because we don't want to be harm, we want to be helpful. So thanks so much for listening to my short, this has been my TED Talk. We're still looking for volunteers. You can take pictures of each other, of the sandwiches and supplies. We've taken pictures of tents, no faces, nothing identifying, because these people deserve our privacy, their privacy and respect. All right. Today's reading, moving on. Today's reading is, Today is a Foggy, Foggy Day, read by Lelia.
Hello. Today's a Foggy, Foggy Day by James Stevenson. Today's a foggy, foggy day. It's hard to see a thing. I cannot see the robins, though I think I hear them sing. The flowers are invisible, I can't discern the trees. My feet are imperceptible, I can barely see my knees. Today's a foggy, foggy day. It's dreary and it's weird. The sun is not in evidence, the sky has disappeared. There's nothing I can recognize, I'm feeling mystified, and I suspect I'll find it worse as soon as I'm outside.
Thank you, Lelia. And what a great reading for today's theme of ambiguity. As Amy said, this is our 64th assembly, and ambiguity is indeed our theme for today. How many people here are new today? Wow! That is awesome! Welcome. Welcome. So Amy and I are co-emceeing today. Every Sunday assembly has at least one MC. And what we are is we are an inclusive, non-religious community, and we meet once a month to hear great speakers, sing songs, hear a reading or two, and we eat snacks at the end. And sometimes at the beginning. I usually get my coffee first, you know. And our motto is live better, help often, and wonder more. And so with our announcements, we're helping each other live better by sharing our lives with each other. And with helping often, we have service projects in between and social activities. So we'll have more announcements later in the program about other ways to engage with us. And a lot has happened since this is our 64th Sunday Assembly, you know, third Sunday of every month. And since the 63rd Sunday Assembly in July, a lot's happened with our members, with our folks here and out in the world. We had the Garlic Festival at Gilroy, we had El Paso, and we had Dayton. And that brought up a lot for me. And then we also had the 50th anniversary of Woodstock, which in my family with my hippie subculture that's kind of like almost a high holy holiday. And so lots happened. And So we'll get going in just a minute now with our today's featured speaker, and he's back by popular demand, Benjamin Bergen, or Ben. He's a professor of cognitive science at UC San Diego. And I was talking to him earlier. In the cognitive science department, there's like 30 people, only 3 are what I would have thought of first, which was neurologists. Maybe a couple more, I don't know. There's psychologists, there's linguists, there's anthropologists, there's all these different people all thinking about how we think. And Ben Bergen, he studies how language and cognition, he studies that in the laboratory and in the wild. He's the author of 2 books. One is Louder Than Words, and that's an introduction to cutting-edge cognitive and brain science and how we manage to extract meaning from the language around us. And more recently, What the F is an examination of how and why we swear and what profanity reveals about our minds and our brains and ourselves. And I know that was the last talk that we had him here for, was about that. But today is more about the ambiguity. And are we ready? Yes. All right. Here's Ben Bergen.
Can you hear me okay? Great. Well, it's a real pleasure to be back, and thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you for organizing. Thank you for making sure that the electrons go from here to up there. So I'm going to talk today about a line of research in my lab and throughout the field of cognitive science on language, which addresses why language is as ambiguous as it is. And before I try to answer this question, I want to first pump your intuition that language is actually quite ambiguous, far more than we usually realize. And ambiguity is often most obvious and most exploited in media. And so here are just a couple of examples of ambiguity in the wild. Is that not? It sounds like it's not coming out of my computer. It's coming out of something else. But let's see. You sure you don't have it over there?
Yeah, check your computer, make sure it's going to Bluetooth. Yeah, no, I've got it.
Curious. I gave ambiguous instructions to the computer, apparently.
This also goes to prove that no matter how much you try in advance to test what's going to happen, technology always wins.
It's a good question. You got confused. All right, let's. You tell me. Okay, let's try. You want to try this again? It's coming from over there. It's coming out of the projector.
Let's just repair it. Okay.
Why is it coming out of the projector?
Oh, because it's hooked up with HDMI and your computer's trying to talk to the HDMI.
That's a silly computer.
It didn't do it before. We'll do that in 2 seconds. I'm in parents, so you should be able to.
All right, let's try pairing this again. It's not pairing.
You're going to 12, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And we're going to punt. The way we're going to punt is we're just going to put the mic up to your speakers. Do it the old-fashioned way.
So I think it's coming out of there.
Yeah, no, it is, but here we go.
Yeah, okay.
So just, where's your speaker? Okay, go to your, sorry. Talk to each other for a second.
So we can do sound.
Let's go to your sound control panel. Go
Yeah,
over
I
here.
just went to internal speakers.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, switch to here.
Oh, no, I'm not in the group yet. So I'm afraid I just blew myself.
So if you hold it here, stool line, yeah. Why didn't it work before? Oh, did it help? Oh, yeah. Okay, let's try it the other way. Did you check the Windows Mixer settings? Yes. Yeah, we did.
You have an audition yet?
Oh, no, no.
You know what they say, nothing makes a joke better than waiting 3 minutes of AV support for it. They say that, right? Okay, so this was supposed to pump your intuition about ambiguity. Here's a good example.
I have to ask for an audition.
You have an audition yet?
Oh, no, no, I'm not in a group yet. No, I'm afraid I just blew myself.
Okay, so the point there is just that words have many meanings. And you can actually quantify how many different meanings words will have. And it turns out that the most common words have the most meanings. The most frequent words have the most meanings. And so like if you take just, you can quantify this. If you take all of the possible meanings of each of the words in a simple couplet, like Robert Frost's couplet, and you just multiply together each time how many meanings each word would contribute, you get to the total number of possible meanings of an entire sentence, right? And on the right, on the y-axis on the right, you can see the total number of meanings of this couplet totals to about 3 trillion. So there's a lot of potential ambiguity here. That's not a really good design for a communication system. So why is language this ambiguous? Well, in fact, it gets worse. Because this is if you recognize the words, but what if you can't actually recognize the words? Words when spoken are not necessarily always clear, especially if you're amplified or you're talking fast or you're in a noisy environment, or you may not be a native speaker of a language, or maybe you're not an adult speaker of a language. So this is an example that caught a lot of people's attention earlier this year. And it went around, it circulated with the title, "Did Grover just say the F word on Sesame Street?" And you can see why.
Yes, that sounds like an excellent idea.
You can't.
Yes, that sounds like an excellent idea.
Well, you can't hear it. So he says that sounds like an excellent idea, but some people heard something different there. And the point of all of that is that the sounds themselves are ambiguous, and even if you identify the words correctly, you've got trillions of possible interpretations per sentence. And even if you know what that sentence is, it could have many different interpretations. As I don't even know if I should try this. He says, this is Groucho Marx, you may have heard of him. He says, this morning I shot an elephant in my pajamas. How he got into my pajamas, I don't know. This guy, I'm also not going to try, this guy has another example of how the same sentence can be used for totally different meanings. One, the literal interpretation, and one that's just kind of implied and learned socially. So his example is, I think I used him the last time I talked here, but he was saying dirty words. This time he's just saying, people come up to me and say, "Do you have the time?" And I say, "Yes." And the point of this is, of course, that the sentence, "Do you have the time?" is asking a question about information. It's asking for information about what you know, not asking you to tell the time. Okay, so language is ambiguous at every level, from the sounds to the intentions behind the sentences. How do we overcome all this ambiguity? We don't seem to notice it much at all, right? If there are trillions of interpretations of every sentence, how do we manage to not notice, and how do we manage to get it right most of the time? The answer, in large part, is because of context. We are really good at using the things that surround words to figure out what they mean. And this isn't just true about language, this is true in general. Take a visual form like this. It's been known for 50 years that if you put a visual form like this in one context, people will interpret it one way. But if you put it in a different context, all of a sudden they see it as something totally different. Right? And the same thing is true of words. You take a word like bank and you put it in the right context and you interpret it one way. You put it in another context and you interpret it in a totally different way. It changes from a noun to a verb even though it's the same string of 4 letters. So all of this is to say that the way that you figure out what words mean is at least in part based on the words around that word. But your ability to use context to shuffle through the possible meanings of words and discern the right one goes far, far deeper than just what words are around. And in my lab, we do a lot of research trying to figure out exactly how smart people are, exactly how clever your solutions are for using context to figure out what a person really means when what they say is not clear. I'm going to give you an example of that. Take a sentence like, it's cold in here. Okay, it's cold in here could just be an assertion. It could be literally just saying, it is cold in here. It could also be a request. It could be a request to, for example, turn on a heater, or it could be a request for a blanket. If you're married, you're very familiar with this type of language. It's called an indirect request. Interestingly, if you have kids, you're also very familiar with this because kids oftentimes their first types of requests are indirect requests, and then they have to be trained to say please and so on. And we wanted to know in the lab, how do you figure this out? How do you actually know whether someone intends a sentence like it's cold in here as a request or as just an assertion, a statement of fact? Well, so we did this in a kind of complicated way. And I'm going to very, very quickly show you how this works. We gave people passages to read. And they're like this. So here you see 2 different versions of a passage. On the top is the part that everyone sees. So it says something like, you and your friend John are taking a road trip. It's very cold outside. You stop at a gas station. All of it's the same. Now, half of people see what's on the left, which is you fill up the tank. Then you and John notice with dismay a blinking light in your car, which indicates that the car's heating system is broken. And then John says, it's cold in here. Okay. The other half of people see, okay, you stop at the gas station, and then while you fill up the tank, John goes inside to buy some water. Meanwhile, while he's in there, you notice the indicator light saying that the heater is broken. He comes out and says, ooh, it's cold in here. All right. The design of this experiment is meant to test whether you're doing something very, very smart. When you read or hear, it's cold in here, are you thinking about what John knows? Because in one case, John knows the heater's broken. In the other case, John doesn't know that the heater's broken. If John knows the heater's broken, then he probably isn't asking you to turn on the heater. But if he doesn't know the heater's broken, he might be. Now this is like adult level gymnastics in terms of mentally modeling what the other person must know with what they say. This is pretty complicated, and so we thought there's no way that undergraduates would do this. And so what we did was we just asked them, okay, after you read John says it's cold in here, which is the most likely interpretation? And what we found was that if John knew that the heater was broken, about 30% of the time they thought that he was making a request. But if he didn't know that the heater was broken, then they thought 77% of the time that he was making a request. So this is a huge effect. So even undergraduates are able to model the mental states of others, use it. I tease, some of my best friends are undergraduates. I mean best friends, research assistants. They're very important to me. I wouldn't get this data without them. Okay, so the point of this is just, you're doing something really, really complicated with context. You're tracking other people and what they know in real time to figure out what they intend. And there's other evidence that people do this differently with spouses than with strangers and so on. We can talk about that maybe later. In my lab, we're also interested in whether people are using the tonality of how a person talks to figure out what they mean. The prosody of their voice, the frequency, the amplitude, the duration. But of course we can say sentences in very different ways. Is that a clue that people use? And so we recorded, again, undergraduates, like I said, vital to science. We recorded undergraduates and we said, okay, read these sentences, but read them as a request or as not a request. And this is what they may have sounded like, depending on whether the Bluetooth complies. Oh, I can't actually see it on my screen. That's funny.
Can you lift that box?
Okay, so what she said was, can you lift that box? Can you lift that box? Okay, so this is a question. So one of those should be a question about your ability. Do you have the physical capacity to lift that box? And the other is, would you please lift that box? Here's another one that also won't work.
Can you lift that box? Can you lift that box?
Any idea? First one's the request? I actually have no idea which one's the request. But humans are pretty good at it, actually. So when we give this to humans and say, okay, here are these two versions of the exact same sentence, which one is the request? They're right about 3/4 of the time, which is pretty remarkable because when you think about it, in writing, you would have no way to tell. And we also ask the question, well, is there enough information in the acoustic signal to train a machine classifier to do what humans are doing? So we automatically extracted a bunch of acoustic features, how loud the sound was, how long it took, what the slope of the frequency was, and fed that all into a machine classifier, and it got it right about 75% of the time. So there's actually a lot of information, not just what words your neighbors are, but how you say a particular sentence. And we have evidence that people are using all kinds of stuff, where your eyes are looking when you say something, what your hand gestures are doing while you're saying something. All of these things are useful for disambiguating language. So, okay, so nevertheless, this seems like a lot of work, right? Why would we as speakers put so much of a load on ourselves when we're being comprehenders? Why don't we just say what we mean? I mean, after all, we know that you can build a communication system that's ambiguity free, right? Because we've made lots of them. They look like this. In Python, if you want to spell out of hello world, the Python interpreter doesn't have to wonder, well, what did he really want when he said print hello world? Was he asking me to take out the garbage? No, it's which print does he mean? There's a different print if you want a different print. Like, we know that there can be an unambiguous communication system. So why don't humans, as speakers, give their listeners a break and just say exactly what they mean all the time? Well, part of the answer is that it's actually really hard to speak. If you think about what you're doing when you speak, you are going from a message, something in the world that you want to describe, through a word that in your language encodes for that thing, which has lots of competitors, right? You have to decide, okay, this thing that I'm thinking about, is it a sofa, or is it do I want to call it a couch, or is it a love seat? You have to pick out the right sounds to say it, and then you have to run your motor system to actually do that work. You have to make muscles move to create sound waves that travel through space. That's a lot of work, and you have to do this about 2 or 3 times a second. So you've got to be planning the next word while you're already processing, right? Okay, so it's really hard to do. Speaking is hard, and so in general, the theory goes, because speaking is hard and listening is just listening, the way that humans have solved the problem of communication is to try to make speech as easy as possible and put the effort on the understanding side, where you have time. You don't have to say a next word when you're listening. You've got plenty of time to think about what they've just said. You don't have to plan anything. You're just attending and trying to solve the problem of what they intended. And we have evidence that speakers actually don't do much at all to help their listeners. So for example, this is a task from a lab, not mine, but Vic Ferreira's lab in the psychology department at UCSD. And what they did was they showed people arrays of pictures. And so the speaker would have the same array of pictures that the listener had, except the speaker would get a star showing up on their array of pictures, and they would just have to get the listener to point to the image that had the star on it. It's pretty simple. So you can do this. It's an experiment. So just say a word or words, however many words you want, to get me to point to the starred object. Rabbit, bunny, great, outstanding. You all succeed. Okay, let's just do this again. Okay, so 2 of you said flying bat. Humans, when given this task and they don't already know what the point of the study is, say bat. And they don't say flying bat any more than, they don't actually say flying bat at all. And this is a problem, right? Because there's another bat. And so half of the time, the listener will get it wrong. And we know that there is one condition actually in which you can get speakers to do this. That's if you tell them to pay attention to the possibility of ambiguity. There might be a homonym here. So in that condition, then they will do it. But in natural speech, speakers just don't help out at all. So there's a lot of evidence for this. Generally speaking, speakers are kind of selfish. They just do what they can to get the words out, and they kind of have to. And you know what, this is true in speech. It's less true in writing. When you read, you find many fewer homonyms, you see many more uses of things like flying bat instead of bat, and you see many more uses of things like this, to try to clearly disambiguate what someone's intent was. Because after all, there are certain things you have in speech, like prosody, the intonation of your speech, and gestures and eye gaze and stuff like that, that you can't do in writing and that is used, that requires other sorts of solutions. Okay, so the other main reason why we can't avoid ambiguity, not just are we lazy as speakers and speaking is hard, but it's because that's what the language gives us. Right? We didn't decide to call bats and bats both bats. We didn't decide to have C, and C, and two, and two. We didn't decide to have indirect requests. That's how the language has evolved. And in fact, all languages have evolved to be ambiguous. We can't just choose to be different because people won't understand us. So there's another question here, which is why did languages evolve to be inefficient in this way? Why did they evolve to have all of this ambiguity? And there are a couple of possible reasons. One is that it helps. It helps speakers to be ambiguous, not just because then they don't have to do all the work, but because there's an efficiency to it, an economy when you reuse the same words. So if you think about words that are reused, that have lots and lots of meanings, I mentioned earlier that they're the frequent ones. Words like two, and two. You use each of those twos all the time. C, and C, also use them all the time. It's almost as if the most useful words, the best words, the efficient ones, the short ones, the frequent ones, the words that are easy to pronounce, those are the ones that get the most meanings, that get reused the most. And you can see this here. So here you see the number of syllables on the bottom, so shorter words are on the left, and on the y-axis you see the mean number of homophones that a word has, and you can see that short words have more homophones in English and Dutch and German, and we've now done this in the lab for French and Chinese and Japanese, and it shows up the same. Shorter words and more frequent words and better sounding words, that sound more like words of your language, have more homophones. And this is consistent with the idea that it's easier for speakers to memorize fewer words, so they have fewer words to choose from when they have to speak, and also to have most of the time that you say words, you use words that are really good words, easy words to say because they're short and so on. There's a second reason why we appear to have evolved languages that are really ambiguous. And that has nothing to do with efficiency. It has something to do with the social costs of saying things. There are some things that you really don't want to be on the record as having said. So, for example, if you want to find a way to solve your speeding problem that doesn't involve a ticket, you might say to, you might not, I'm not recommending that you do this, but some people I hear will say things to police, to CHP officers like, officer, is there any way we can take care of this here without having to go through the whole process of, okay, so you haven't said anything legally compromising. You can therefore get off the hook. You have plausible deniability. You never, oh, I just meant, you know, is there, can we speed this up by having me sign the ticket more quickly? And the officer can pretend that he or she never actually understood what you really meant. They have plausible deniability as well. And this happens all the time. The example that I came up with yesterday was Netflix and chill. Okay, so when you invite someone over to for Netflix and chill, okay, you could just mean you want to hang out on the couch and watch Netflix. That's a plausible interpretation. And if someone says no thanks, then you can feel fine. Oh, they didn't get what I meant. They were just rejecting, they just don't like watching Netflix. They're a Hulu person. But if you said the actual thing that you intended, then you're on the hook, right? So there's this idea, and Steve Pinker has advocated this, that plausible deniability is an important reason why we don't say what we mean. Okay, so most of all, languages have evolved to be ambiguous in part because it's more efficient, and in part because it allows for plausible deniability. But mostly it's because of what we talked about in the first place, which is that humans are really good at disambiguating. The languages that we speak have evolved to fit the cognitive niche of really smart comprehenders. They've grown to be ambiguous because they can, because it creates efficiency for speakers and doesn't tax comprehenders too much, because we are so good at figuring out from context what someone intended. So from a scientific perspective, this great strength in disambiguating reveals powerful human abilities to discern intended meaning. And from a technological perspective, it means that we have to come up with really great engineering solutions if we want machines to be able to do what comprehenders do. So you can go online and find lots of examples of smart speaker fails where kids ask for pictures of, zoo pictures and end up with adult content. Because it's really hard. It's a really hard problem if you're not a human. And so people at tech companies are trying to implement solutions to disambiguate language that imitate human abilities to disambiguate language using context and other sorts of clues. So I want to conclude here. There is lots of ambiguity in language, but actually it's not such a problem, in large part because the types of ambiguities that exist in language are actually there because of evolution's ability to exploit the cognitive capacities that humans have in the first place. I really enjoyed our time together, and I hope that if you have any questions, you feel free to come up. I think we're going to do a little question session after the session is over. So thank you very much for your time, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks very much, Ben. That was great. Again, great last time, great again. So like Ben said, if you have questions, he's graciously agreed to hang around for a little while afterwards. We'll meet up in this corner and he'll be happy to take your questions. The next thing we're going to do is our personal moment. I say this every time I have the opportunity to introduce our personal moment speaker. It is my personal favorite part of Sunday Assembly. To me, it's what connects us all in really deep and meaningful ways. It's also one of the hardest spots that we have to fill because it's hard. You have to be brave to get up here and do it and share your story. Although some of our stories are hilarious and funny and lighthearted, some of them are very serious and painful, but they're all important either way. So we're always looking for personal moment speakers. If you're not comfortable with doing your personal moment yourself, you can always write it down and have somebody else read it for you anonymously, so your story is still out there for us, but you're not having to do it yourself. We can also help you write up your personal moment if you want to do it yourself, but just need some help organizing your thoughts. If you're interested in sharing your personal moment, we would really, 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 really love to have you do it, and you can talk to Laura to get more information on how to do that. And today's personal moment comes from Camille Yoder. So welcome, Camille.
So unfortunately, this isn't one of the funny personal moments. Okay, is this close enough? Closer. 5 years ago, I was 23. I was a known activist in my town and in Indiana. I was in graduate school, and I was working at a women's shelter. Over my time working in the shelter, I had to confront many of my stereotypes about people who experience homelessness and domestic violence. I had clients with graduate degrees who had been laid off and just needed a bit of time to get back on their feet. I had clients who had gone through medical procedures that had left them broke. I had clients who came to us covered in bruises, but after one night in the shelter returned to their abusers. And of course, I had clients who did drugs and liked to gamble. But the majority of my clients then, and over the recent years that I've been doing similar work here in San Diego, have complicated stories that are never as simple as, if they sobered up and got a job, they wouldn't be homeless. Over 80% of my female clients were fleeing domestic violence, and most already had or obtained employment shortly after becoming my client. Homelessness is so stigmatized that just being homeless can make it hard to get out of the situation. Employers don't like to see shelter addresses listed on resumes. Your reputation can be destroyed if the wrong person finds out that you lost your housing. And that's why when I was 23 in graduate school working at a women's shelter and I became homeless, I lived in my car and tried best to hide my situation. I had been in a relationship that had turned, or likely had always been, abusive. I had to leave suddenly without many belongings or any money from our joint bank account. I was embarrassed and ashamed, even though I knew that it could happen to anyone and I wouldn't judge another. I felt like I needed to appear more stable than I was, and I did a good job of it. In the following 4 months, I was promoted twice, and I continued to advance in my graduate degree. I focused on school and work and surviving the hot summer days. No one would have guessed what I was going through. My office inside a house had a bathroom with a shower that I used at the end of my shifts, and I was able to keep groceries in the refrigerator. I felt like I had it all figured out. Then one day, I realized that I hadn't brushed my teeth in almost a week. I had access to a sink, but I was so focused on surviving and doing everything I needed to do to keep my job and my status as a student that I completely forgot to brush my teeth. That memory is always a reminder to me to give clients a break when they forget to do something or when they aren't able to meet a goal. Without stability, it is incredibly difficult to keep track of the simplest things. Now I'm 28, and I was hopeful that when I got up here to talk that I'd have an impressive nonprofit director title to give you. I wanted to be able to say that just 5 years ago I was homeless, and look how impressive I am now. I still partially believe that for my story to be something that anyone cares about, then I need to be speaking as a successful woman looking back on a hard part of my life. But I'm stigmatizing homelessness if I believe that me and my story don't have as much value because I'm currently job searching. There is far too much stigma associated with experiencing homelessness. Even those of us who volunteer and work in homeless service agencies and outreach groups treat people experiencing homelessness differently than the average person that we meet. When someone who appears homeless approaches us, speaks to us, or makes eye contact with us, we often look the other way and ignore them. It's just easier that way. A few years ago, I was on a sidewalk in Portland with a friend looking at a map. A man who appeared to be homeless approached us. My friend was visibly uncomfortable and didn't want to engage with him. The man did not ask us for money or food. He simply wanted to help point us in the right direction. My friend is a liberal person who supports programs that help people like the man who approached us. But I am sure if the man did not appear to be without housing, that my friend would have gladly engaged with him. I have given people on the streets food and money, but it's not always possible and definitely not sustainable to give something to everyone you see. So I make a real effort to smile when I see people sitting on the sidewalks, to respond when I can with sorry I don't have any change, because they are people, and by ignoring them we contribute to this divide in society. Those people you walk by every day are people just like you, and they deserve respect, even if they aren't taking showers, brushing their teeth, looking for jobs, or doing whatever you think they should be doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Camille. That was really great. And now we have, once again, Paul Svensson.
We've done this song several times, but I never assume that everybody knows anything. I assume you all know something, but not necessarily the song we're going to do. So I'll sing the verse, and then I'll sing the chorus, and then we'll all sing the chorus together, and then we'll pretty much have it figured out, right? This is yes. To be humble, to be kind. It is the giving of the peace in your mind. To a stranger, to a friend. To give in such a way that has no end. We are love. We are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace, we are war, we are how we treat each other, nothing more. Want to try it? Take the whole thing with the verse. To be humble, to be kind. It is the giving of the peace in your mind. To a stranger, to a friend. Such a way that has no end. We are love. We are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace. We are war. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. To be bold, to be brave. The thinking that the heart can still be saved, and the darkness can come quick. Dangers in the anger and the hanging on to. We are love, we're one, we are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace, oh, we are war. We are how treat each other, nothing more. A little different here. Tell me what it is that you see. A world that's filled with endless possibilities. And heroes, they don't look like they used to. They look like you do. We are love. We are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace. We are war. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. Sing it once more. We are love. We are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace. Yes, and we are war. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. Good singing.
All right. Oops, I got the wrong thing here. So today with our featured presentation, he talked about ambiguity and language, and we're going to touch on that from another angle in a moment. Actually, a pretty similar angle, but anyway. But ambiguity can also be seen in, or it can also be visual. So we can have our first slide.
So for this one, a lot of people look at this picture and see a vase. A lot of people will look at it and see two faces, just depending on whether you're focusing on the positive or negative space. So yeah, how many of you would look at it first and see the vase? Raise your hand. Okay, and how many people see two faces? All right, so not as ambiguous as we might have expected, but okay.
And you might be able to hold both. Let's go to the next one. All right. Who sees the duck? All right. Who sees the rabbit? And can you make it a rabbit and a duck at the same time?
Yeah.
All right. And we'll do one more.
So for the last one, it is an example of how where you choose to focus can actually change your image while you're looking at it, because if you focus on one of her legs, she will appear to be spinning clockwise, but if you shift your focus to the other leg, she will spin the other way. So kind of a cool one, we thought too. Yeah. Yeah.
Has anybody been able to make it switch?
No? Yes? Kind of cool.
All right. All right, so now we're going to go back to language. As we heard from Ben Bergen today, I realized it ties in very much to what we're going to talk about next, with some examples of that ambiguity in my life and Amy's life. So the question, where are you from? That can be meant in several different ways. And it can be perceived in at least as many ways. It might be a nice question, and it might be offensive. When I was in middle and high school, my best friend was Ilona. I was new to our school, having spent the years prior at a hippie school in the woods. Ilona was in a swamp and lots of things. But anyway, Ilona was born in the Philippines. Her mother was Filipino, and her father was white American. She had moved back and forth several times between Manila and New Jersey. When I met her at our middle school in North Florida, she helped me figure out how to fit in. Things like how Wrangler jeans would not do, and certainly not the overalls I had, and the jeans had to be Levi's, and how you need to put a comb in your back pocket. And so it worked out well. She taught me how to do it. I made it in public school. Sometimes when we would meet people, they would ask her that question, where are you from? Now that I think back on it, no one ever asked me that question. Ilona would answer, New Jersey. They would say, no, really. I mean, where are you from before that? Or even worse, what are you? And she would say, American. At the time, I remember that I thought that she should tell them she was from the Philippines. She seemed so irritated and belligerent, and I didn't get it. I thought she was being a little rude. I didn't see that she thought they were being rude. We never talked about it. It was just something that happened occasionally. In North Florida in the late 70s, there were mostly white people and black people in our categories, and not many other ethnicities. And I think some of these people who were asking, where are you from, were uncomfortable with what they perceived as ambiguous ethnicity. And they were trying to find a category, a box, to put Ilona in. And she didn't like it, and I didn't understand.
And sometimes, even when you are on the receiving end of that, it can be something you really don't understand. Like, why is this happening? And a lot of it depends on how you see yourself. So my ethnic background is I am split straight down the middle. I'm half Danish and half Japanese. Or as I prefer to think of it, half Viking and half samurai. But So when I was growing up, when we moved to California in the mid-'70s, and believe it or not, at that time in the mid-'70s, there weren't a lot of people who self-identified as Asian in San Bruno, the part of the Bay Area that I moved to. And I hung around a lot with a friend of mine named Julie Look, and Julie was half Chinese, same as me. She had a Chinese mother and a white father. And so we were good friends, and it really surprised me I'd come from Hawaii, where everybody's Asian, so, you know, I fit in just fine. But I wasn't somebody who self-identified particularly as Asian, and I think just the way I look, I just don't think I look all that Asian. So I was kind of taken aback when Julie and I would hang out, and all of a sudden we were subjected to quite a few different ethnic slurs from the other kids we went to school with. And I remember especially being surprised that they were all interchangeable, right? There's specific ethnic slurs that go with specific Asian nationalities, right? No, kids don't know that. So I got called all of them. And even at the ripe old age of 10, I realized that it was a fruitless and absurd effort to try to tell somebody, no, that's the wrong ethnic slur. This is the one you want, right? So I gave up on that. But then one day, a kid came up to Julie and I and said, "You guys are just zipperheads." And I was intrigued because I had never heard this word before, and I had to ask him, does this go with an ethnicity I've never heard of before? What is a zipperhead? And he went on very calmly to explain to me that Asian people all look like they have a zipper across the back of their heads that's pulling their eyes back and making them slanty. And I was at the same time hurt, like I wanted to cry and was upset, but also kind of wanted to ask him, like, where did you come up with that? Like, did someone tell you that? Or was I supposed to know what that meant? Or that was just a kind of a, okay moment. And then looking back on it as an adult, I think of the absurdity of me asking him to explain his ethnic slur and him calmly doing it, right? He wanted to let me know, make sure I understood. So that was one of my experiences. And then fast forward about 20 years or so, a little less, 15 years. So now I'm married to Mark. We're living in Seattle, and I still don't particularly self-identify with the Asian side of my heritage that much. In fact, I don't know if any of you have ever read the satire book about stuff white people like, but that book could pretty much be titled A Few of My Favorite Things, right? So that's kind of how I was. But my mother-in-law had come to visit, and while she was up there visiting, she wanted to have lunch with a friend who lived in the area, and I ended up tagging along for this. We went to lunch, and it was the first time I had ever met this lady. Her name was Virgin. She was a wacky lady, but I got to know her later over the years. She was fine, but this is the first time I had ever met her. This was in the 90s. And we were sitting, she had known Mark his whole life. Susie and Virgin had been friends a long time. So we're sitting at the table having lunch, and Virgin suddenly turns to Susie and says, "I just wonder what it is about Mark that there must be something about his personality that he would be attracted to and want to marry." And she turns to me and says, "An Oriental." And it took me a second to realize, oh, she's talking about me. He didn't marry a rug, or, what's up with that? So, and they both looked at me like they wanted an answer from me. So I said, "I'm not Oriental. I was born in Denver." And that was it. I didn't know how else to respond. But I think it was the first time in my adult life that I realized that some people might actually put me in a box that was absolutely not connected in any way with the way I thought of who I was, or that people could see me as in such a completely different way that I saw myself. And it was really an eye-opening moment for me. So anyhow, that's my story.
So in the last few years, I've heard from like stories like what Amy just told and read like articles that people have, shared on social media, that a lot of people really feel otherized by that question, where are you from? As kind of an implied or even overt suggestion that you don't belong here. And I now have retrospective empathy for Ilona's experience. And today, when our president says such awful, untrue things about immigrants, unambiguously terrible things that put people into horrible boxes, and he's fostered in an environment where racists feel very comfortable and emboldened. So now, when I wonder about someone's ethnicity, and I think I'm wondering in a really open-minded, interested in people and interested in the world kind of way, I no longer ask. I stop myself. I go on without the satisfaction of finding a box for someone in my brain. There may need to be more context, more trust for a question with such baggage. I now figure it can all come out or not in the time that's comfortable for the other person. I can work on being more comfortable with not knowing, with letting it be ambiguous for me.
And now, we're going to have our moment of silent reflection. There's a lot of serious things that we can reflect on. Yeah. There's a lot of serious things we can reflect on, but if you need something a little bit more lighthearted to reflect on, is it blue and black or is it white and gold?
All right. So now we'll have our announcements. So if you are one of the couple people doing those announcements, you can make your way up here. As it also shares in the program, Sunday Assembly, we're entirely run by volunteers, all the people you see up here and in the morning setting things up. But we do have expenses, our monthly rent and our snacks and occasional other expenses for events and whatnot. And so we are always looking for donations, and we've got several ways that you can do that. You can go onto our website, and you can always go old school and put them in the donation jars. And if you're not in a position to make a donation, that's also completely fine. Sunday Assembly is free. But if you are in a position to do so, we love monthly recurring donations. It helps us budget and know, all right, we're going to have enough to make room facility rent for the next while. And so we love those. And let's see, we have our announcement, folks. So let's have Brendan.
Okay, cool. So in the interest of diversity, if you don't want to give us your money that way, we also have a fundraiser coming up. About 3 weeks from now, we're going to do crawfish boil. Should be a good time. Always is. We fly them in live, cook them on site at a beautiful campus at C-SCAN that we're back at. It's really a good time. So please come join us. Oh, and buy tickets. You can get them at the laptop in the back. If you'd like to do it today, that'd be great. I need to know ahead of time so that I can order enough for everybody. So let's get it done.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got two announcements, and they're both related to pictures. Keeping in mind what Alexa shared with us earlier about what kinds of pictures we might share or not share or where we might take them, the Communications Committee, of which I'm a part, is wanting to collect more pictures from Sunday Assembly events. And that doesn't have to be this year, it can be from any time. So if you have any pictures that you've taken at Sunday Assembly events over the years, we'd like you to email them to us, and the email address is in the bulletin. It is no, it's not www, it's just sundayassemblysandiego@gmail.com. So if you have pictures, I actually saw some people taking pictures in here today. Pictures that you can share, email them to us. We're looking to update our website with some more recent photos. The second thing I wanted to announce is that after the assembly ends today, we want to invite everybody who's ever done anything as a volunteer with Sunday Assembly to gather on the patio for a group photo. That's one of the things we need to update, is a photo of all of you that contribute in any way, hosting events, helping clean up after events, set up events, help with Sunday Assembly, just anything that you've done, the more the merrier. Come get your picture taken. Thanks.
Quick addendum, that says the 9th, it's actually the 7th.
It is correct in your program, though. And we'll make sure it's correct on the website. I think it is. So we are always on the lookout, our program committee is, and for excellent speakers and topics and events to host. And so we welcome your input. And we're going to close out with our song. And after that, we'll have coffee, tea, and snacks.
If you feel like standing up, might be a good time to do that. If you don't, that's okay too. I can see clearly now the rain is gone. I can see all obstacles in my way. Gone are the dark clouds that had me blind. It's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. Sing that again now. It's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. Got a little harmony there. I like that. Oh yes, I can make it now. The pain is gone. All of the bad feelings have disappeared. And here is the rainbow I've been waiting for. Gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. Sing that part again, even though it doesn't say it. Gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. Look all around, there's nothing but blue sky. Look straight ahead, nothing but blue sky. I can see clearly the rain has come. I can see all obstacles in my way. Here is that rainbow I've been waiting. Let me hear you now. Gonna be a bright, 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 sunshiny day. Yes, gonna be a bright, 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 sunshiny day. Yes, you know it is. Gonna be a bright, 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 sunshiny day. Gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day.
Join us for coffee and snacks right now, or to talk to the speaker over here, and also Barrio Star for lunch if you would like. Heading over there pretty soon.